Okay, so we are doing Let's Read Throne of Glass chapters 12 and 13. Celaena gets beaten by the captain of the guard with a sword. She's a little bit out of shape. She goes right for her knives, which is, her favorite means of defense, and kind of comes right back after him. Thankfully, she's interrupted by the armsmaster, as she is a little bit out of shape from being in the salt mines for over a year, and he calls all the champions up and has them introduce themselves. They know by now that the 24 of them are going to be competing in a contest that lasts until Yule Mass, that there's going to be a bunch of different challenges, but they don't really know what they're going to be. Some of them are kind of surprising characters to have chosen, given that, the nobles are gambling on this, which is an interesting attempt to keep them involved in the court. So she basically gets to know her fellow competitors, a couple of whom, seem interesting, some of whom they pretty much skim right over. And then Chaol pretty much hauls her unceremoniously out into the hall. Um, Without much time to review who she's going up against, she kind of starts to launch into this whole I'm Aderlin's number one assassin, and he reminds her, you're supposed to be Lillian, the jewel thief, and, kind of heavily implies that this is something that she should be able to do, and there's a lot of tactics involved because she was the number one assassin. So she kind of, spends some time thinking on her many faces, or at least that's what I inferred from the text, because she does eventually agree to go along with it. And they go back to Chaol escorting her around in her free time when she's not training. She does start training rather viciously, but she does keep her facade on, her face on, and attempts to be this, Lillian Gordana, this jewel thief. Now, on the latest walk, she runs into a very interesting woman who turns out to be a princess, the Princess Nehemia, one of the Aelwi. And since not everyone's spent, a year in the salt mines being taken care of and teaming up with them, nobody really speaks her language except Celaena. So naturally, they make plans to get together, which incenses pretty much everybody. She's from a land that's struggling to resist the king. Celaena is Ardalin's assassin. They click like, whoa. All of the women in the book are presented as very strong characters. It's something that's shown as accepted, which is interesting because I don't know that, even with that level of, joking around and whatnot, that would be that accepted even in today's culture. So that was a really interesting thought to me. Also, the fact that everything is being bet on, and the question of is self-defense still relevant because we live in such a bubble-wrapped society? Are there really still arms masters out there, and do they still have that kind of respect? So those were a couple of questions that popped into my head going over this. The other thing that I thought about, kind of some of the pet peeves, was if she worked in the salt mines every day for a year, there's a scene where she goes running with the contenders and she vomits, and she wouldn't have been winded. She might have had cramped legs, but that's not how it works when you're running. So just as a heads up, you gotta fact check whenever you're writing, and these things don't have to jump out at you when you're reading, but as you do progress, even in professional writing, this is the kind of thing that you have to check. If you're going to make a statement about your company, or you're going to make, etc., in some sort of work report, you have to go back and you have to check on things like that, and it's for that reason. Somebody's going to notice it. Knives are a ridiculous weapon against a sword. There's a big difference between a knife and a dagger, and I don't know if she doesn't know the difference. A knife is about this big, a dagger is about this big. Either one of them are horrible against a sword. You can barely pair, it's called pairing, you can barely block a sword with them. So the whole thought of her going for her knives and she's going to take them down is kind of ridiculous, unless she is just beyond good, and the woman's 18, so questionable there. So the other pet peeve that I had is she's getting a surprising amount of lateral movement for a notorious assassin, and Chaol seems to have an awful lot of free time. So I am very rooting for like Celaena and Chaol, team Chaol all the way. That is something that I noticed and kind of felt like mentioning. I'm Tatiana and Jindra. You can find me on YouTube at Tatiana and Jindra. Pretty straightforward there, or my blog is badfantasy.blogspot. badfantasyrx.blogspot.com, and you can follow along with a written version of this as we do the Let's Read. Thank you for joining me.